Welcome back to the Social Seller Podcast with Conor Paulsen, where we interview the world's highest quality communicators, professionals, business owners, creatives, and everything in between. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're a high quality communicator, there's a good chance you're living a lot happier life, but you're also bringing those opportunities into your life almost like a magnet. My guarantee is that on this show, we only interview people that I, one, look up to, and two, that I know are going to continue to kill the game for years to come, and I want to make sure they're on your radar. But what I've learned is by asking the best questions, we get the best responses, and that's what the highest quality communicators, our social sellers, are all about. Let's hop inside to the Social Seller Podcast.
Good morning. Happy Thursday. I am so excited. Welcome back to the Social Seller. I want to hop right in and introduce you to the CEO and founder of the Montgomery Companies, Jordan Montgomery. Now, not only are you one of the fastest growing young professionals for a Fortune 100 company, and that's when I first heard about you on campus. I didn't know you yet. You ended up leaving a great business opportunity in a full-blown career, earning a lot more than most people do in a good year in life. You left that to pursue a passion in coaching and speaking, right? And now you're doing that on a global scale, able to travel and work with some of the coolest people in the world. You're also a father of 3 beautiful daughters. You're a husband, a community leader. You are a humble Iowan, and I mean this, we'll hop into this and why you've been such a role model for myself. You're a fellow University of Iowa graduate, and you are hosting incredible live events around the country too, and I'm excited to dive in. Jordan Montgomery, thank you so much for being here.
Conor, thanks for having me, man. It's been awesome just to watch your journey and see your growth. We go back like 10 or 12 years. And I got to meet you when you were really young, and you were intuitive and you were innovative, and I knew you had a desire, and I knew you would be successful. And it's just so cool to watch your journey, man, to have a front row seat at some of the things that you've done and all that you've accomplished. So to share this conversation with you today is an honor.
I appreciate that, Jordan. And likewise, to have people like yourself from smaller communities, both of us growing up in small town Iowa, to have influences like that, it was that idea in my mind, like, well, if Jordan can do it, then it doesn't matter what everyone else says. Like, Jordan's doing it, I can probably do something similar. And I love that. To hop in a lot of your content, you talk about ownership. And I know that can be a very ambiguous term. What does ownership mean to you?
Well, I think ownership means extreme accountability, that you're accountable first and foremost to yourself. I think it means there's a deep sense of responsibility over the gifts that you've been given. If you've been entrusted to lead, if you've been given ability, if you've been entrusted with talent, I think it means that you steward your talent well. But I also think it means when things go well, we give credit where credit is due. And when things don't go well, we accept responsibility. So as leaders, that's a really important step, is to accept responsibility when things don't go well and to give credit where credit is due.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm sure that applies not only in the professional career, you probably see it in your personal life too. Is there a balance when you hear some coaches talk about extreme ownership? And is there a place where you can go too far with extreme ownership? Or do you see taking full ownership is a quality trait that any leader that wants to continue to ascend should use?
I just really respect when people own all parts of their organization or all parts of their team. I'll share a quick story, Conor. I was working with an executive leader recently, and we had a conversation that I thought was just kind of a routine conversation. He was talking about a couple of team members, and we were just sort of downloading some thoughts and sharing the activities and the productivity of his team members. And he circled back with me like 3 days later, and he texted me, and he's like, "Dude, we've got to talk. Is there any chance you could grab 5 minutes today?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll make 5 minutes." He's a good friend, and he's a coaching client of ours. And we get on a call like later that afternoon, and I was like, "Hey man, what's up?" And he's like, "Man, I've been thinking about this ever since our conversation. I talked about one of my team members in a way that was a little bit negative, and I'm just not proud of how I spoke about them." Now, granted, he's only speaking to me. It's a confidential conversation. But in that moment, Conor, he took ownership over something really small when nobody else was watching, nobody was listening, but he wanted to own his actions, even though it was a confidential conversation. And I thought, wow, like that's ownership. We can all own the big things. When we make the big mistakes, it's easy to say, wow, I dropped the ball, right? I hope you would do that. That's called being a good human. But being a good leader is I own all parts, even the small things, even the things that are insignificant, even the things that very few people will ever know about. I'm going to accept responsibility. And when you're faithful with a little, I think it means you'll also be faithful with a lot. So those are some of the things that I think about around taking ownership, and also giving credit.
And it looks like there's a little lag there too. So when you're confident with the little,
I got you just fine. Yep, I got you. Yep.
Okay, perfect. And looks like the internet might not be running as fast as we'd like. And I love what you say there, because it is so important to be able to take that ownership. And I think for anyone listening, myself included, and I'm sure you would agree too, is that challenge early on, you have to be tested. And that's why it makes so much sense to have values. And talking about that, at what age did you start to define values? Did you have them in your early 20s when you started to see success? And is there a way that you would recommend versus starting to get that attention? And maybe if you don't have values established, can it create challenges?
Yeah, I think for all young professionals, we've all heard this, right? Like you hear people say, understand your values, focus on your core values, think about your values. Well, I heard that a zillion times, but I didn't have a context for how to think about that, or how to understand my values, or then, and more importantly, how to live those out. And so here's what I'd say in simple form to people listening that maybe want to better understand their values, or do some work there. I would just simply say, prioritize who before what. I did not do that in my journey. And Conor, you know a little bit of my story. I was very much prioritizing what before who. What I mean by that is I was very focused on what I was accomplishing before I was thinking about who I was becoming. And that's a dangerous place to live, because sometimes your goals can actually take you to a place that you never intended to go. If your what is in front of your who, your life can move in a direction that you never really intended it to move in, because if you're driven, if you're dedicated, if you've got some level of giftedness or natural talent, your life can evolve very quickly. And so I would say to any young person listening, just think about who am I becoming, and make sure that you're asking that question first. And you're asking that question alongside of what you want to accomplish. Who do I want to become as a father, as a husband, as a wife, as a mom, as a friend, as a community member? Those were questions that I was not asking. And it was hard for me to see that. I would say too, to the young professional, like maybe you're not a dad yet, or you're not a mom yet, but like, think about that. Like everything that I do today affects my future children. Everything that I do today affects my future spouse. Everything that I do today affects my future circle of friends. And I think I never made that connection in my early 20s. Later on in life, when I got into my 30s, I really started to think about the who, because I was forced to. Right. Yeah. I had a wife. I started having children, and all that started to change. But if I could go back and do it over again, I would have prioritized who before what. And I would have asked the question, who am I becoming, a whole lot more often.
Wow. So much value to unpack there. And one of the notes that just comes from, I don't know if it's a mentor or a book, they say that, accumulating wealth in life, and when you start to have money, all it does is magnify the problems or challenges you already have in life, right? So it just backs this thing that happiness, a happy individual works hard to be happy. And there's also effort in going towards not being happy, right? It's easy to look at someone that's happy and go, oh, they must have their life well put together. It's easy for them. I think a lot of people forget that those individuals usually have practices each day to show up with that type of energy. What on a daily basis allows you to reframe and make sure you're in that state of mind that that every action you take has a reflection on your daughter, your wife, your business?
Yeah, I think for me, it's order of loves. That's something I think about a lot in my life. So for me, it's my faith, it's my wife, it's my kids. And if I'm loving the people in that order, if I'm caring for people in that order, it's usually things are good. Like I'm serving people well. I feel good. I'm fulfilled. I'm living on purpose. Where I'm not good, Conor, is if all of a sudden my business starts to become more important than my kids. Now it will never be more important than my kids in my own eyes and in my heart, but there's some days where my actions would say that. Exactly. If you didn't know me, right? Like Ben, our friend Ben always talks, he says, hey, let me have a conversation with your actions. And so for me, my actions, my calendar, my attitude, my speak needs to reflect order of loves. If I say, hey, these are the things that I value in this order, then that needs to show up in how I act, how I behave, and what my calendar looks like. And I would tell you that I fall short often. My wife would tell you that because I'm human. And so I work on that, but it's at least a framework for me to say, okay, Jordan, here are the things that are important. This is what you're giving your life to. How are you doing today? How are you doing in these areas? And for me, that's been something that's, helped to keep me on track. And one of the things that I often say, and I really mean this, is I want to be respected most by people who know me the best. And I think that's a real challenge for young people that are trying to accomplish something, right? Because you're so concerned with how the world views you. And social media really plays into that, right? Like, I want to look a certain way. I want to do something. I want to go accomplish something really significant. And so the world will see me a certain way. And eventually you wake up and realize you can have the adoration of a lot of people that barely know you and they think you're awesome. But if you have the adoration of people that barely know you and the people that know you really well don't respect you, that's not living life on purpose. That's not a life of significance. So I want the people closest to me. Like I want, so if somebody says, hey, that guy out there, wow, he's cool. I hope that the person they're seeing that looks like they've got character and integrity and is living life on purpose is the same person that people see like in my home, inside the walls of my home, in my community, in my neighborhood, with my closest friends. And that's something that I think about quite often.
Wow. That it gives me shivers because it is so true. And I see the same reason that it's instilled in the way we're raised to some degree. And I think a lot of us, but it is so easy once you hit a certain age, and I would say early 20s, or like directions in life and influences can happen where you have to start defining for yourself what matters to me, what doesn't. And the big point here is our actions are the filter, right? If we do value it, it's one thing to say it. And again, I'm guilty of this too, day in, day out, but I know I'm getting better, having the values and then trying to take action aligned with them, right? And that's what Neil Arngale defines success, right? The gradual realization of a worthy ideal. Just defining I'm going to go somewhere and then taking at least one step in that direction every single day, right? I love that.
Well, I see that play out in your life, Conor. I've seen you evolve and mature as a young professional. I mean, you've grown so much, even in the way that you communicate, in the way that you show up. So I'm proud of you. I see you asking that question, who do I want to become? And you've always been ahead of yourself in terms of your maturity and your growth. You've been wise beyond your years, but I just want to compliment you in front of our friends live. I see that, man, in your life, and it's been really cool to watch.
Jordan, I appreciate that for real. And coming from you, someone I look up to, that means even more, right? And I want to make sure that I make the people that allowed us to get here proud, right? And it's those same people that made us who we are. And I'm excited to dive into a conversation of, actually, let's just hop in. A lot of salespeople, fellow communicators, love watching The Social Seller. And whether you're in sales or not, we're all actually in sales. Whether you want to get your date, your soulmate to go on a date with you, or you want that promotion at work, right? What enabled you to be a top 1% of 1% at like what age? Like you're 21, 22 in a Fortune 50 financial company, right? And we haven't even had this conversation, but could we get a little granular about what did separate you, right? I know you played some sports growing up, but as far as I know, you didn't play in college. How did you channel that focus at a young age? And where did that success at such a young age kind of come from?
Well, first off, I would say I was around a lot of good people. So I had a lot of strong mentors and people that were willing to pour into me and invest in me. I just believe that none of us are self-taught. There's no such thing as self-made. So I got to give a lot of credit to people who helped raise me personally, professionally. I came from a good family. I was rooted in my faith at a pretty young age. Doesn't mean that I was perfect there, but I at least had an understanding of where gifts come from, which I think allowed me to stay open-minded. So I had a good team around me. I was rooted in a good family with a strong faith. But then after that, I would say I was really curious. I asked a lot of questions. I always joke I probably broke the firm record for questions asked in the first year. I just asked a lot of questions. I was really curious. I was hungry for knowledge. I wanted to be around top producers. I was ferocious about absorbing and applying knowledge. And I almost at a certain point in my life became addicted to it. Like I was always trying to gain an edge. So there's good to that, but there also can be danger in that because it quickly became my life. I mean, all of a sudden my identity was wrapped up in my achievement. But in the beginning, it was really a good thing. Like I was just very curious. The other thing that I learned to do, and I would just give my friend Bob Berg credit for this. He wrote the book, The Go-Giver, and he really touched me at a young age, really, really imparted words of wisdom. He said the word sell comes from the Old English word salon. And the word salon means to give. And I think I understood at a young age that if I just gave, that I could really affect people and I could really impact people. And it's the old Zig Ziglar, right? Like if you help people get what they want, you'll get what you want. And that started to ring true in my life. I just started to give, and I didn't have a lot to give, but I started to give my attention, my empathy, my support, my encouragement, my time, treasure, and talent to people that I just wanted to serve. And I just started to realize, like an example, Connor, I remember I was in the financial services business. I grew up like you in rural Iowa. So for those listening, I grew up with, I didn't know anybody with money. In fact, I'm from the largest Amish community west of the Mississippi. And I remember figuring out like, hey, it's pretty hard to be a financial advisor if you try to work with people that don't have any money. Like that was an issue. So I called a meeting. There were 15 people in Iowa City, community that you're very familiar with. And I called 15 people. I said, hey, we're going to get together at this bank. We're going to sit in a boardroom and we're just going to talk about business and life. And I just asked these 15 very influential people to come to this lunch meeting. I bought Pancheros burritos because that's what I could buy. Not a fancy meal.
How old are you at this time?
I think I was 24 at the time. And I was maybe like 1 or 2 years into my business. I was starting to have a little bit of success, but I still didn't know people with money. I was just kind of surviving. And I called the meeting and I just said, hey, I've got nothing really to share other than I wanted to bring you all together. I wanted you to have the opportunity to meet each other. And I just love to introduce you to one another. So I had like 30 to 60 seconds about each person. I gave them a commercial. So I said, this is my friend Kevin. Kevin is the owner of all the McDonald's in town. He's influential. He's curious. He's sophisticated. He's a giver. And I talk about Kevin. And then I go, hey, this is my friend Adam. Adam just sold a tech company out in California. He's new to town. Him and his wife, Bridget, are really involved in philanthropic efforts. And I just appreciate Adam's heart for people. And then this is my friend Ravi. And I just started to kind of brag on him. And I did nothing. Like literally, I just called a lunch meeting. I gave him a burrito and I said some nice things. But looking back, what happened is we created an environment for people to connect and have conversation with other like-minded people. And then I just repeated that and I repeated that again. And eventually we had groups of 200 or 300 people that were meeting on a regular basis. And you were a part of some of those groups. And I was just at the center of it because I spent my time connecting people. And I believe that connected people are connecting people. If you want to get connected, you just start connecting. So back to what allowed for early stage success, I think it was understanding this word salon, which means to give. And that is sales. Sales is not about taking, it's about giving. At its highest form, it's about giving to others. So anything that you've learned, I mean, you've been kind of selling your whole life. You're a great salesperson. Anything that you want to add to that, Connor?
Yeah, Jordan, I love what you said. And Bob Berg, unreal human being. And that book has been so impactful. It's a book that's meant so much to us at Uptown Creation that in college, when we could barely afford it, after reading it, and it's not even that long of a book. You can read it in a day, right? In a 3 or 4 hour sitting. Not only was I sitting in the office reading it, and halfway through, it's the first book I've ever read, and I was a sophomore in college, right? And I have tears coming down my face. And they're like happiness, right? But it was this clarity moment, the way he explained it and the narrative that goes with it, it does all come down to giving, right? And I was under the belief for the last probably 5 years, almost a decade in sales, from, retail at Shields All Sports to selling ladies' shoes to B2B sales the last 6 or 7 years. So always about communication. Now, I started to think at the top of the sales world and also valuing those people and saying, all right, what are those badges of honor, right? At the top, I started to see was high ticket closing, right? Meaning you were selling something, a product or service, for $10,000 or more. And I was like, yeah, that has to make sense, right? This is, if you're selling yachts or really expensive watches, cars, whatever, this is obviously the space to be in. And I thought that for probably the last 2 or 3 years. And the reality is we're talking about having values and taking action aligned with them. Come to find out, I think there's a level. I know there's a level that goes way beyond the high ticket closer, and it's being what we call the social seller, or just being a quality human, having values and taking action aligned with them, and then giving, right? Coming from a giving, loving heart. If you're giving, you're coming from abundance. That's a magical place to be. And people feel it, right? And that's something you do extremely well, Jordan. People feel your presence, right? Whether it's you and me doing an interview like this, and we haven't met up in person I haven't seen you at least for a year or two. And I know that'll change soon, but that's something you've always done well. And that was something my dad had mentioned a handful of times growing up. Conor, people don't remember you for what you say. They remember you for how you make them feel, right? And I always thought that was something that you and me have in our favor, in the sense that we can bring the energy. We're fortunate to be happy individuals, and sometimes that's a place to come in. Would you agree? And did you ever hear the terminology of like high ticket closing? And it's kind of almost a trap. I see it attracts the people that want to get rich, right? Not the people that want to accumulate long-term wealth, right? And really give back on a global scale, build positive influence.
Yeah, I think it goes back to winning where you're at. You know, there's somebody listening, Conor, that's not where they want to be. And maybe you're in a position and you feel like, man, I should really have another position, or I really should have another career, or I really should have another job. I love that you just shared that, you know what, you sold shoes at Scheels, right? Now it's okay. And so I could go back to like Conor Paulsen selling shoes at Scheels. And I bet you did that with great energy, great enthusiasm. You learned. It wasn't the end all be all job. You didn't plan to be there forever, but you decided, I'm going to win where I'm at. I'm going to bloom where I'm planted. And I want to do this job to the best of my ability. And I think people like that get promoted. And I'm not talking about, you know, getting promoted inside organization. I'm talking about getting promoted in life. Like if you decide to serve, I'm gonna win where I'm at. I'm gonna do the best with what I have and where I'm at. I'm gonna bloom where I planted. I think those people get called upward. They get promoted. They get recognized. They get noticed, and their life unfolds in a really awesome and powerful way. And I think it's also like when we think nobody's watching, somebody's watching. People notice. Small moments matter. It's been said we're always one moment away from a completely different life. That is just so profoundly true. And I got to work with athletes, and man, is it it's so evident with athletes, because there's these small moments when they think nobody is watching. And they're not even saying anything. They're not even like maybe playing the game. They're just sitting there. But their body language says everything. An old mentor of mine, he would say, your body language never whispers, it screams. I was like, man, this moment right now, you don't know it, but there's people watching you that have influence, and you're communicating something to them. And literally all you're doing is sitting in a chair. But how you're sitting in that chair, how you're carrying yourself, your attitude, your posture, your presence means something. And so when I look back at your journey, I think about your energy and your enthusiasm and how you decided to give. Man, it added up to where you're at today. And I just wanted to underscore that with people listening. Back to service, back to giving, you did that, and it made a difference. So I commend you for that, and it's been cool to watch.
Thank you. And I appreciate that, right? And a point I want to state here is that for both of us, we had no idea what we were doing. And still at times in our company, like we don't. Yeah, we sit 7 minutes trying to figure out lighting and like, is this the right video, or do we have mic set up correctly? Hopefully there's a team that can help usually. And that's the reality. I was so scared to talk about that for a long time. I thought the world needed to believe that I understood it, because otherwise, like, clients, can you imagine? Like, I'm paying, this company, and they're trying to figure it out. Well, the reality is we're all figuring it out. We all need to fail on a daily basis. Love the Hawkeye mug. You mentioned the athletes, and honestly, I'm curious, because you and Ben Newman, great friends, but two very influential people out of the Midwest. And along with Priscilla, I tell people you three are literally putting the Midwest on the map and putting out the good content that the world needs to see. What and how did you get involved with the athletic program? I've always seen you working with elite professionals, but then there's, is it Central Arkansas football program? There's the Alabama football program with Ben. How did that come to fruition? And I know it brings so much energy to you, and I see that transfer to the team. What does that involvement look like, being around top dog athletes?
Yeah, I would say two things. I'd say number one, there was a model to follow. And number two, there was a relationship that allowed me to connect. So the model to follow, you and I both share a friendship with Ben Newman. And Ben just helped me understand what was possible. I saw him do it. And I think for all of us that are young and growing, there's examples all around us, right, of people that have done it. And I had a friendship with him. And so again, I was curious. I asked a lot of questions. And Ben sort of opened doors through his example. I had an example to follow. I had a model to follow. Number two is I had a relationship. And I'll just give a shout out to a guy named Drew Gaynor, who's become a very good friend of mine. He's actually a coaching client of ours. And he connected me with the head football coach at Central Arkansas, a guy by the name of Nathan Brown. And now Nathan's become a dear friend, and that work has been very meaningful, and it's allowed for us to do other work in sports. And so like last week, I just spoke to a bunch of NBA athletes at an event. And, I think about that moment. I was prepared for that moment because I was faithful with this other situation. Doesn't mean I did everything right, but I showed up there with great energy, great enthusiasm. Even though it wasn't a bunch of professional athletes, it wasn't a bunch of All-Americans. It was really good athletes, and I was really excited about it. And so I just tried to show up with great energy and great enthusiasm, bloom where I was planted. And that's sort of been my story. There's nothing special about me. I didn't play college sports. I'm not the most athletic guy. Everything in my life has been applied. So it's not like I didn't go to school for, sports psychology. I've just been around some really great people, and I've decided like I'm going to win where I'm at. I'm going to do the most that I can with what I have, and I'm going to follow people who've done this at a high level. And so for anybody listening, again, I just say stay connected to the right people, follow an example, and then, bloom where you're planted. And it's amazing how that recipe will just kind of take it to some really cool places.
Thank you for sharing that and taking action and coming from a good heart and bringing 110% of whatever we can control. And that is the energy and the excitement, the happiness we're going to show up with, regardless if we got 3 hours of sleep the night before or not. Something that you touched on, I think 2 or 3 separate times in this, and it's so easy to overlook, but it is a foundational truth in communication. You talk about asking more questions than anyone else in the organization's history, hiring on coaches and consultants, continuing that. You're a student for life. It's the quality of questions, right? And this is something I'm always improving. In college, I had a mentor in Chicago named Carmen Rossi. And he pulled me aside one time, and he could see, similar to what we're talking about, he could see, all right, you're trying to figure things out, you're hustling. But looking back, we were both very inefficient at those times in our early to mid-20s, just doing anything that felt right. And he said, Conor, you hear the cliche, you never want to be the smartest in the room. He's like, yeah, it has truth. But he said, the truth is the second you learn how to ask better questions, you start to get better responses, right? And I didn't know the gravity and the magnitude of it hearing that, 10 years ago, but continuing to apply it. And I know my questions get 5 to 10% better each year because I'm crafting them, and I'm A/B testing as a marketer and a sales professional. It's wild what happens. Could you speak on the quality of questions that you ask or that you look for in individuals that you coach?
Well, I think it is true that the answers you get are only as good as the questions that you ask. So I love what you just shared about asking great questions. It's asking great questions. It's asking specific questions. That matters. So if I'm going to get feedback, if I want to solicit a response, I'm going to get very specific. You see this in how people get feedback, right? They say stuff like, hey, Conor, can I get some feedback? That's a really crappy question because it's not specific. It's almost impossible to respond to. And you're not going to give me a dishonest answer because you're trying to be dishonest. You're going to give me a dishonest answer because for you to jump in and say, hey, Jordan, here's 5 things you need to fix is socially awkward. So I need to give you the opportunity to get specific with me. So if I was getting feedback, if I was asking you a question maybe specific to my communication style, I can't say, hey, Conor, give me some feedback. I'd say, hey, Conor, I'm working on my communication style. I'm specifically working on storytelling. Storytelling is an opportunity for me. I'm trying to slow down the stories. I really want my words to paint a picture. Could you give me some feedback specifically on how I did with setting up my story, telling my story, and landing my point? Okay, now you can speak into that. So one, I would say specific questions leads to specific answers. And as simple as that sounds, a lot of times our questions aren't specific enough. I get on coaching calls all the time. People say, hey, I want to talk about prospecting. I want to talk about closing. And then they're like, so how do I get better at closing? I'm like, dude, that is like the worst question. That is so open-ended. I have no idea where you're going with that. Like, help me understand what the hell you're actually asking. The second thing I would say is how you ask the question matters a lot. So it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. And for people listening, I have you think about two things. Number one is a posture of humility. And number two is a heart of gratitude. If I have a posture of humility and I have a grateful heart, I am much more likely to get a great response. So let's say you want time with somebody that has influence. Maybe it's a CEO or somebody that you've respected and looked up to. They have a busy schedule. Okay, well, here's how I think a lot of young professionals pursue top leaders and ask for time. Here's the question. Conor, could I pick your brain? Hey, Conor, I'd love some time with you. I love what you're doing. Any chance I could snag 15 minutes and pick your brain? That is the least attractive question ever, period. Like, that question is awful. Who would ever want to respond to that? Like, you're never going to respond to that and say, you know what? I would love it if you would pick my brain. Please pick my brain. I can't wait for you to pick my brain. Okay, I could come at you the same type of question, but said in a very different way with a posture of humility and a heart of gratitude. I could say, hey, Conor, I've been thinking about you, and I just wanted to say thank you for all that you've taught me. I listened to your show, and I just got to tell you, the social seller has been a game changer for me. It's added so much value in my life. I want to share these two specific things that you've taught me. Here's number one, and here's number two. So thank you for what you've taught me. Also, I just wanted to let you know, if you'd be willing to spend 15 minutes of your incredibly valuable time with me, I promise you two things. I'll come prepared and I'll pay it forward. Also, I want to give you permission. If for any reason you just don't have the time right now, I totally get it. You're a super busy guy. Don't worry about it. I'll circle back with you down the road. Now Conor's going, okay, this guy or this gal is going to do something with whatever I give them. They're clearly taking action. They're grateful. They have a humble posture. They're even giving me permission to say no. You're probably a lot more compelled, number one, to say yes, and number two, to be present in that meeting if we do end up spending time together. So back to asking good questions. It's about the question that you ask, be specific, but it's also about the way that you ask the question. I don't know if you want to add anything to that or anything you want to, or even subtract.
I really like that. It's coming from a giving heart, and you have to put it in context for that individual. I went through a phase where I would probably say freshman, sophomore year of college. We were doing business competitions and things, and I'd reach out to someone and I wouldn't get a response in a couple of days, and it would be an ego hit for me. Now, I didn't know that at the time, and so I'd almost get like this emotional response for the person, not putting myself in their shoes, realizing there are busy people out there, and anytime if I'm sending an email to someone requesting time, that's really what an email is, right? And I forget what marketer talks about it like that, right? Our email inbox cannot consume our time because that's everyone else's request to take some of your time. And it's important we're working on our business, not in it. What I would say is the personalization is absolutely critical, even in lead generation, right? One of the biggest things that we see, one of the biggest mistakes we see in the B2B realm, especially with LinkedIn doing 82% of global B2B leads either started or formed on the platform, right? 82%. That number is only going to be going up, right? Now, that's exciting, but most people want the shortcut. And they think the time has to go in the follow-up. If I can bring them in the pipeline, I can get them. Now, what I would like to consider is just flipping it. What if we took the 15 to 20 minutes in between each individual prospect to look into the company's profile, right? If we're reaching out to a VP of development for a health tech company, a fintech company with 50 employees, let alone 3,000, I'm going to go look at their company's newsletters and not read one, read like three, right? Get an idea of how their organization communicates internally. But if I read three, I can start to get a good idea of what they're excited about over the next couple of quarters. Or I could also go see the CEO. Was the CEO on a podcast in the last month or two and actually spending the time to listen to 10 to 15 minutes, right? And Jordan, I love that you say that. I only wanted to go a little bit more micro or chunk down in the sense of what this can look like, right? what is another valuable way in something I call, value-based, well, internally we just call it value-based articles. It's just a nice subtle touch point. I go onto Google News and probably twice a month, so every couple of weeks, and I will look up something relevant for our space, our clients. And I'm really thinking in terms of what would our clients value. Now, once I find one, whether it's LinkedIn, B2B space, communication like this conversation today, I send it to them, whether it's an email or a message. Now, it goes something along the lines of, hey, Jordan, read this Forbes article this morning and thought of you. Hope it provides you the same value, right? And I send it. Now, purposely, no call to action. I got value from it, and I have a good feeling they will too. It's wild what happens when you start to give without looking to receive per se, knowing that the universe and all the gods in the world do want to benefit us. And like you said, come from a good heart place, have values, and magically these higher powers start to put quality people in front of you and opportunities. You start to become a magnet like Jordan, right? Where you're not only able to help build communities and bring attention and bring influential people together in the communities that we grew up in, but I see you doing it on such a large scale too. And in my lifetime, I don't know anyone from Eastern Iowa that's done it at this scale. And I'm just excited because you're just getting started.
Well, right back at you, man. I see so much ability in you and so much impact in you. And you too, man, you're young and you're dedicated and you're committed and you're doing significant work. And it's just been so cool, man, to watch your journey unfold. And it is cool. We were talking kind of offline before the show. Like, I think for everybody listening, you think about the people you kind of grew up with and the people that really knew you before you did anything, wherever you're at right now. Those are special people and they always will be. It's kind of like that old adage, like there's nothing like the friendships, like the people that you grew up with. Those friendships will always be different. And my relationship with you will always be different because we both knew each other when we were kind of 20 somethings. You were even a little bit younger than that. Just very inexperienced, very green. And we still have a lot to learn, but I've so much appreciated your support and your encouragement and the way that you've just cared for me and loved on me over the years. So thank you for being just a good friend, man. It's been a joy to be on this journey with you.
I appreciate that, Jordan. And likewise, I have to mirror the exact same thing. You continue to influence, and I know how much you've influenced myself and a handful of professionals that were all in that same age range too, that went through Iowa and also wanted to give back, right, on different scales. So before we go into the call to action, I want to bring up, you are known as a coach and you're a paid speaker. You get to do awesome stuff, get to speak in front of crowds of a lot of people. And that's on another topic. I want to know what that feels like. What I would love to learn is, how are you getting coached, right? You are the coach, but what a lot of people don't see is also the work and the dedication and how you get coached. Could you just give 1 or 2 points to fellow professionals out there that are listening and that have maybe considered a coach, or like, why the hell do I need a coach? I had one in high school, whatever sport I played. You don't need one in life.
Well, number one, I would say I get coaching from a lot of people that I've never met, that even today maybe barely know, if they know at all, that I even exist. And so 2 of those people are John Maxwell and Craig Rochelle. Another would be Brene Brown. Because in today's world where there's so much information available, there's YouTube shows and there's podcasts and there's books. There's just so much information available. So, one is I've just learned from a lot of people consistently. Like, I've walked with John Maxwell for 15 years. I mean, I've listened to all of his podcast episodes. I've read his books. I get his newsletter. Like, I'm learning from that dude all the time. So those are a few of my coaches who are some of the top thought leaders in the world. And then more specifically, I have people that challenge me that I meet with on a monthly basis. I have a couple of people that I meet with weekly, different areas of my life, different parts of my life. I think it's really easy for us to get overweighted in one area. So we could say, hey, I've got a bunch of business coaches that are really helping me with my business. One area of coaching that I've received this past year, it's probably been the most meaningful, is on our marriage. So my wife and I have a couple, Jill and Mark Savage. We do faith-based marriage coaching with them once a month. And we say that to people like, oh, we're doing marriage coaching. And people are like, what's wrong? Or like, are you guys good? And we're like, no, yeah, we are good. And we're good because we do this coaching. Like, it's actually like we're being trying to be proactive, right? And our marriage isn't perfect. But it's so interesting, you think about the different parts of your life, how many people spend all kinds of time growing their business, and they'll spend all kinds of resources getting coached in their business, but they're out of shape and nobody's holding them accountable in their physical life, or their marriage is falling apart and nobody's holding them accountable in that area, or as a parent. So I think one is, Conor, I'm trying to look out for the different areas of my life and making sure that I'm getting feedback, counsel, and accountability in those areas. There's some people that I learn from kind of macro, and then there's people that I know really well that know me really well intimately. So those are a few things that I think about as a framework for relational growth and coaching. Hopefully that's helpful to somebody listening. And I just say, seek out the people that can help you in those areas. Interview a lot of people, ask intentional questions, get to know them. Coaching is all about fit and personality. It's also about timing. So if you just heard something and you're like, wow, I need to get a coach in that area, go interview a few people, find out, who's the right fit for you, and then hire them for a season. Doesn't have to be forever. I just heard this the other day. The average Olympic athlete has 7 coaches just for their physical, mental life, physical life, training technique, right? They have 7 different coaches. So if that's true of an Olympic athlete, the best of the best, then what does that say about us? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not an Olympic athlete. I wasn't blessed with those gifts and abilities. Man, I need a lot of counsel. I need a lot of coaching to help me grow and get better. So I appreciate the question. When you think about coaching, anything that you want to add to that or share or say?
You hit the nail on the head. And I realized that yes, there's the personal and the professional, right? And in the last year, I hired my own personal coach outside of the business coaching, right? So the business, let's keep growing the business, and that's the focus. That's awesome. But I agree. And I started to realize there are these other areas, and it is so much about fit. And I had talked to a handful, probably 50 over a year. And for someone, it did make a lot of sense. And now after 6 months, the easiest way I can put it is I can sleep better at night when I lay down in bed, right? Because there aren't those little things in the back of my mind, knowing that there's chain links in my life, and it might be personal, right? It might be a relationship thing with someone in my family, or it might be XYZ, but I go to sleep knowing that's there and not having a plan of action to know that I'm working towards it. So then over time, it can actually probably create some level of anxiety, and then untreated can turn into other things. Now, a coach for me just ensures, even if we're meeting once a month, that I'm putting thought into those areas, right? And I'm growing. And I think that's the coolest part, Jordan. So props for you and your wife that you can do that on a monthly basis. Not only is it proactive, it just immediately tells me you guys are working on your family. You are growing, right? Just like the company is growing, these things better parallel, right? There's momentum upwards. And that's a good wake up call for myself. The day when I, get married and want to be able to live with the same values, I will definitely be there, because the same thing we're talking about coaching. And as a male, it almost feels a little bit like a therapist to a degree, because now that we've worked together this long and I'm fully willing to be fully open with this person because we have such a private, trusting relationship. I didn't know this getting in. I didn't know I needed someone else to talk to. Not that I needed it. I thought I had family. I have 3 sisters, 2 brothers, awesome family and support. So I'm still learning, I guess. It's uncovering new areas. But for the first time in my life, after 6 months, we look at the metrics, right? And that's the other cool thing, is when you can start looking at, wow, in January, this was like what I valued as the number one thing I need to work on in my life. I needed this to change. And now, and in that time, I did not think this emotional challenge I was going through would be able to ever really completely leave. And then to see it goes from this magnitude of being and controlling my life almost to forgetting we do that. And then 6 months later, this was 3 weeks ago, it's like, hey, it's 6 months. We're going through this. I'm going to ask you a few questions. We're going through it. And then we go over the feedback. And it got 75% better. Without a coach, I was never putting metrics to these things. I didn't know how. It's exciting when you do, because that's what these individuals are here to do. And now there's all different scales. There's all different types of coaching. And then there's consultants that can come into your organization. So just to simply explain, and what I love, Jordan, you mentioned, all of this information is online, or the vast majority. And I think that's also a great place to start. And I know for both you and myself, that's through college. I couldn't afford mentors or coaches. So it was Tony Robbins, Rob Sharma, Brennan Burchard, Wayne Dyer. I know you and me both like Wayne a lot. So I completely agree. Just consume your time and throw yourself all the way in.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said, man. And so for somebody listening, they don't have the resources. There's somebody listening to this right now and they're like, man, I wish I could hire a coach, but I can't. You can, go to YouTube, go to Google, type in the names of the people that you respect, take notes, learn, and just absorb the content.
Barnes and Noble, right? The good old book.
That's right.
Barnes and Noble. Yes.
$5. Yep.
Exactly. Hey, Jordan, I know we went a little over. Thank you so much. I know you're a very busy individual. We have been wanting to bring this together. Appreciate your time like no other. For anyone that got value today and want to learn more about you or more about your coaching and the work that you're doing, and honestly, just to keep up with someone very influential that I know is going to be on everyone's radar over the next couple of years, where can they find you and where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so we're active on LinkedIn. We're also active on Instagram. We post on Facebook and Twitter. So any of those channels. On Instagram, we're at Jordan M. Montgomery, Jordan Montgomery on LinkedIn. And then our website is montgomerycompanies.com. So send us a message on social media. If you want to send a message on LinkedIn or send me a direct message on Instagram, would love to connect with you. If I can be helpful, maybe it's just answering a question or, guiding you in a certain direction. Would love to be helpful. And would love just to serve or reach anybody that's listening.
I appreciate that, Jordan. For anyone looking to take action, that is definitely, if you're listening into this, I would definitely take Jordan up on that and be able to ask a question. This is someone that I know a lot of individuals look up to. Jordan, thank you again for your time. Happy Thursday. Let's keep up this momentum.
Conor, God bless you, man. Thanks for being who you are. Thanks for this opportunity. It was way overdue for us to have a conversation, and I'm glad that we got to have it with some friends listening. So keep being you, man. Keep leading.
Thank you. All right. Talk to you soon.
We'll see you.